unfortunately, that's all the time we have left this evening, but let not your heart be troubled. Why? My friends on the 5 are up for a special live edition that starts right here on the Fox News Channel. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you from Binghamton, New York tomorrow night. We're back on the road. We're coming to you from Broome County Forum Theater. We're in Binghamton, New York. Voters in this great state will head to the polls on Tuesday, tonight, 2016. Presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz joins us for the entire hour. We have a large audience watching the show, and they were invited by the Cruz campaign. Welcome, Binghamton. Anyway, it's our privilege to have back 2016 Republican presidential candidate Senator Cruz. How are you?
Sean, I'm doing terrific.
Well,
great
I
to
see
you.
You've got one of those step detector things.
Yeah, the Fitbits.
Yeah. How many a day on the campaign trail?
You know, it's actually pitiful. You spend a lot of time on planes, on buses, on cars, and so my count is embarrassingly low. The goal is 10,000 steps a day, but I'm sorry to tell you, when we're crisscrossing the state, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah. You know, a lot has been made, even last night, about your comment, New York values. Now, we have a governor in New York. His name is Andrew Cuomo. And he actually...
Popular man.
Yeah, very popular guy, popular governor. And he actually talked about, well, those conservatives that are pro-life and believe in the right to bear arms and that are anti-gay. Well, I'm not anti-gay. I'm pro-traditional marriage. They have no place in New York. So I said, well, okay, I'm going to take my money and leave because we have a 10% state income tax here anyway. But it's become a big issue in the campaign. I want to give you a chance to respond.
Well, sure. Look, the phrase New York values was actually not my phrase. It came initially from Donald Trump, from an interview that he gave with Meet the Press a number of years ago. And he was explaining his strong support for partial birth abortion. And his explanation was, hey, I'm from New York. Those are New York values. They're not Iowa values. And so that was his own explanation. And, you know, I would note the point you just made a second ago. Last week I was down in the Bronx and was meeting with a number of Hispanic and African-American pastors, including a Democratic state senator, Senator Ruben Diaz. And, you know, Senator Diaz is a pastor, and he was mentioning, he brought up New York values, and he said, listen, I'm a Democrat, an elected Democrat. And he brought up exactly what you said that Cuomo said. He said, my Democratic governor and my party told me if I'm pro-life, if I support traditional marriage, if I believe in the Second Amendment, there's no place for me in New York. And Senator Diaz, a Democrat, said, those are the values we're fed up with, the values of liberal Democrats who are intolerant to the common sense values of most of the men and women of New York.
Yeah. You know, I know that you know my background, and I was born and raised in New York. I have a special place in my heart, and we saw greatness out of the American people, people in New York on 9/11. Upstate help, Long Island help, and the entire country, in fairness, rallied around. There are so many good people here.
Absolutely.
But governing has been horrible in this state. And especially up here in upstate New York and Binghamton and other areas, they economically have been suffering for decades.
Right.
How, if you're elected president, do you help them?
Well, and no one knows the negative consequences of liberal democratic policies more than the people of New York, because they've been suffering under them. They're seeing jobs going away. You know, a perfect example of those liberal democratic values is Governor Cuomo will not allow the people of New York to develop the Marcellus Shale. You know, in Pennsylvania, there are people getting high-paying jobs. There are people providing for their families. Their property values are going up. The Marcellus Shale extends here into New York, but knucklehead politicians apparently think New Yorkers don't want jobs. That doesn't make any sense.
Those are high-paying jobs.
They are high-paying jobs. We are seeing all across this country an energy renaissance. And it is Democratic politicians in New York and California where the resources are there, but they won't allow us to develop them. And the answer, my number one priority as president, is bringing jobs and economic growth back to this country, bringing high-paying jobs back to America.
We are, you mentioned the Marcellus Shale, and you mentioned Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
We are the Saudi Arabia. We are the Middle East of natural countries that hate us for what is the economic powerhouse for our economy, which is energy. We could become energy independent. How big is that a component in terms of the economy and creating jobs and revenue for the country?
It is an enormous component. You know, a couple of years ago, I gave a speech on the Senate floor where I took a map of the entire of the United States, and every county was color-coded for whether median income had gone up or gone down. That map looks almost exactly like a geological map of shale formations. And in fact, I got a clear plastic overlay of the shale formations, and you could see where you have the Bakken Shale or the Eagle Ford or the Permian or the Utica. You could see income spiking like crazy. In the Marcellus, in all those Pennsylvania counties, median income has gone through the roof, and yet the line from New York to Pennsylvania, almost like the finger of God drew it. The counties on the other side of that line, even though they have the resources, their income hadn't gone up. Just the same, the Monterey Shale in California, none of those counties, the income had gone up. And the one exception was the counties in and around Washington, D.C. that were bright green, that have gotten fat and happy. And almost every other county in America, income has stagnated or gone down.
Do you believe the Saudis have artificially driven down the price of a barrel of oil to take away American jobs, for example, in North Dakota and Texas and Louisiana, and ultimately that would be New York and Pennsylvania?
Sure.
Do you think they did it on purpose to drive natural gas businesses out of business?
Well, that's certainly part of it, and I think the Saudis are flooding the market with oil. Another component, though, is the Fed. I mean, we have had Fed policy that's had a strong dollar, a weak dollar, a strong dollar, a weak dollar, and those booms and busts. Right now, we have an artificially strong dollar. That ends up driving down the cost of commodities, whether it is the cost of oil and gas, or whether it's the cost of coal, or whether it's the cost of steel, or whether, if you're a farmer, the cost of your crops. We need to have, with monetary policy, stability. Not a strong dollar, not a weak dollar, but a stable and sound dollar.
You know, I want to stay on this message of the economy for a minute, because, you know, I pointed out there's this cute little girl over there, and I don't know if we can get a picture with our jib shot over there in the middle aisle there. We can. We've now doubled the national debt for that little girl.
Yeah.
We have now created an America where 95 million of our fellow Americans are out of work, 50 million in poverty, 46 on food stamps, doubled the debt. And I'm thinking, I don't see any way out of this. They're not talking about negative interest rates. If we put our money in the banks are going to charge you to keep your money. That's how bad things have gotten because of government involvement.
Well, they're doing that in Japan. They've got negative interest rates in Japan.
So how do we solve the debt? How do we get the jobs back? And how quickly could it happen?
Right.
Elect Cruz!
He's a very wise gentleman. There is only one way to turn around the debt, and that is to bring economic growth back. And the key to growth, the heart of our economy, it doesn't come from Washington, D.C. It comes from small businesses all across this country. And the way you bring growth is you lift the boot of the federal government off the back of the necks of small business. Two-thirds of all new jobs, they come from small businesses. So if I'm elected president, we will repeal every word of Obamacare. We'll pass a simple flat tax and abolish the IRS.
Is a flat tax This is an important question, because a lot of people, I've studied the flat tax and the fair tax. I actually like both ideas. But is it revenue neutral in terms of the government? And can we do all of this? You know, Chris Christie was running for office, said, Social Security's gone. They already stole it. Do we have to touch entitlement, Social Security and Medicare?
We can absolutely save and strengthen Social Security and Medicare. We've got to. They're fundamental bulwarks of our society, and I'm campaigning on a very clear reform plan to protect and save and strengthen them. But if you look at the tax plan that I have, and I have a very, very clear and detailed plan. You can read about it on our website. It's tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. But you know, look, today is April 15th. It's normally tax day. We got an extra couple of days till Monday.
Oh, sorry.
But you know, today's a good day to reflect on how things will be different in just a couple of years if we win this election. Because my simple flat tax for a typical family of four, first $36,000 you earn, you pay nothing. No income tax, no payroll tax, no nothing.
If you don't pay a payroll tax, you still get Social Security benefits.
You absolutely still get your Social Security benefits. Now, above $36,000, everyone pays the same simple, flat 10% tax. No longer do hedge fund billionaires pay a lower effective tax rate than their secretaries. It's fair and even and uniform. And then on the business side, we eliminate the corporate income tax, which is the highest in the developed world. We eliminate the Obamacare taxes. We eliminate the payroll taxes, which are the biggest taxes most working men and women pay, and we also eliminate the death tax, which is incredibly unfair.
That's corrupt. You know, I know this came up in earlier debates. I know for most people here this is probably meaningless, but I don't know how many of you know that there are actually trillions, not millions or billions, trillions of dollars parked offshore that corporations will not bring back to the United States because of the high rate of taxes that they will pay. It's corporate inversion. You can incentivize them, repatriate the money by lowering the rate, but wouldn't that create jobs and manufacturing centers and factories and trillions of dollars thrown into the economy?
Absolutely, yes. That's what my tax plan does. It'll bring trillions of dollars back. We replace all of those business taxes instead with a simple 16% business flat tax that is fair and uniform. No longer do giant corporations with armies of accountants pay less, effectively pay little or no taxes, while small businesses get hammered with a punitive 35% corporate income tax.
You know, this raises a... So would they pay 16% to bring it back, or would you give them a break so that we can encourage the building of manufacturing centers?
So there's a one-time repatriation tax of 10%, which would bring in trillions of dollars. And what this plan will do, you know, the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation studied this plan, and they score everyone's plans. They concluded that the Cruz Simple Flat Tax would produce 4.9 million new jobs, would raise wages, would raise after-tax income for everybody. And you know, the average family, Sean, under the Cruz flat tax, over the next decade would take home an additional $7,600. That's real money when you're struggling to make ends meet.
I want to tell you how bad it is in New York. I spent a decade of my life doing every job in a restaurant, from dishwashing to cook to bartending and being a waiter. I spent 10 years of my life in contracting, in the building trades, doing everything, laying tile, framing houses. In New York right now, I pay a 40% federal income tax. I pay 9.9% state tax, 4% city tax. I pay my FICA taxes. I live in Nassau County, the second highest property tax county in the country. You live in Texas, you don't have a state or city income tax. That's 15% more of our money that we could keep if New York wasn't so greedy.
That is exactly right.
Isn't that insane?
And I can't solve the problem of left-wing Democratic politicians like Cuomo and Bill de Blasio.
By the way, we call him Comrade de Blasio on the show.
But what I can do is reduce the burdens of Washington that are hammering small businesses, so Washington isn't making it harder. And here in New York, we will see jobs coming back from Mexico, jobs coming back from China. We'll see manufacturing jobs coming back to the state of New York.
It's 62 cents of every dollar if you don't have the corporation and the tax benefits. All right, we're in Binghamton, New York. We're just getting things started. You having a good time? All right, we'll continue. 2016 Republican presidential candidate, Ted Cruz. He's with us for the hour. Also, we'll get some audience questions and much more straight ahead. Welcome back to Hannity. We're in beautiful Binghamton, New York. Senator Ted Cruz is with us for the entire hour tonight. You know, Senator, one of the things that I really believe is scary, everybody in New York knows somebody, and if I did a show of hands, knows somebody that was killed on 9/11.
Yeah.
We had have a president that can't utter the words radical Islamic terrorism.
Yeah.
ISIS has taken over cities that we won, Ramadi and Fallujah and Mosul and Tikrit, and a president in denial.
Right.
How is this a generational battle? Does this go on forever? Or can we actually defeat ISIS, and how do you do it?
Well, you know, Heidi and I lost a friend of ours, Barbara Olson.
She was a friend of mine, too.
On 9/11, and she was in the plane that flew into the Pentagon. And we were living less than a mile from the Pentagon, where from our apartment, I mean, you could smell the soot, and Heidi at the time was working in the White House. And when those planes were coming in, at first the Secret Service came through and told everyone, stay where you are, don't go anywhere. But then when the second plane hit, the Secret Service was running through the White House complex, and they were saying, get out now, don't walk, run. And so Heidi ran out. They wouldn't let her get her car. And so she wasn't able to drive home, so she took off her high heels and walked across the bridge and walked home barefoot. And I know there are people all across New York who experienced that, in D.C. and Pennsylvania and all across the country. We've had terror attack after terror attack after terror attack, most recently in America in San Bernardino. And in the wake of jihad, of radical Islamic terrorists who've declared their intention to murder as many of us as possible, I think there are a lot of Americans who are fed up with a president who follows every terror attack, going on TV, refusing to name our enemy, and instead lecturing us on Islamophobia.
And I'd even take it a step further. Then he talks about the terrible deeds done in the name of Christ and has no real historical knowledge of what the Crusades were really about. And after this last terror attack in Brussels, he's doing the wave with communist murdering dictator Raul Castro and doing the tango.
Well, and it did seem to really inconvenience the president to have a terror attack when he was, in the middle of going to a baseball game with a communist dictator. And that, it shouldn't be, I'll tell you, and watching President Obama stand there on that stage with Raul Castro, while Castro slams the United States of America, and then listening to President Obama say, well, gosh, I agree with Castro. Traitor! Is it asking too much to have a president actually defend the United States of America?
That was embarrassing.
It really was.
All right, but let me get back to ISIS.
Yeah.
Look, you used the phrasing, I criticized for it. I actually agree with you. You said carpet bomb ISIS.
Yes.
You didn't say carpet bomb civilians. You said carpet bomb ISIS. And they're plotting and scheming and planning our demise. How do we find them and execute that?
Well, we start by using overwhelming air power. In the first Persian Gulf War, a little over 25 years ago, we launched roughly 1,100 air attacks a day. It was saturation, carpet bombing on the Iraqi army. We did that for 37 days. And after 37 days, our troops went in a day and a half, mopped up what was left. That is overwhelming air power.
Can we do that in Syria and Iraq?
We can. Now, right now, the Obama administration is launching between 15 and 30 air attacks a day. I mean, it's photo op and pinprick. It looks good on CNN, but it doesn't actually kill the enemy.
I don't watch CNN, but okay.
What we need to be doing instead is taking out their command and control, taking out their infrastructure, taking out their communication, taking out their finances, taking out the oil fields, taking out the oil refineries, and taking out their troops, utterly and completely destroying them. We need to combine that with arming the Kurds, who are boots on the ground, They're fighting right now.
It also goes to the heart and the issue of this president started with 10,000. Yeah. Hillary Clinton wants tens and tens of thousands of Syrian refugees. Here's the problem. You know, our Obama's former envoy to defeat ISIS, General John Allen, our National Intelligence Director, James Clapper, James Comey, our FBI Director, our Assistant FBI Director, and our Chairman of our House Homeland Security Committee have all said that ISIS, just like they did in Paris and Brussels, will infiltrate the Syrian population. How do we ascertain if they're good people that want a better life or if they are ISIS? How do you do that?
We can't, and that's what, you know, ISIS has told us they intend to infiltrate those refugees. The Paris terror attacks, they infiltrated those refugees. James Comey, the head of the FBI, appointed by Obama, told Congress that he cannot vet these Syrian Muslim refugees to determine if they're ISIS terrorists. If I'm elected president, we are not going to be letting in Middle Eastern Muslim refugees who may be infiltrated with terrorism.
Now, to those on the left that say, no, Hillary Clinton has been out there in force saying, oh, that's unfair. I would support helping the Syrian refugees that are victims of a civil war.
Sure.
But can't we have a safe haven in their own country and provide food and medicine and blankets and cots and supplies?
And no nation on earth has been more generous giving aid to the refugees. We give more than 10 times as much as any nation on earth in terms of providing money, taxpayer money, to care for these refugees. But if these refugees may be infiltrated with terrorists, they should be resettled in the Middle East and majority Muslim countries where they can't wage jihad against America.
Is there a deeper issue here? For example, if somebody grows up under Sharia law, and they want to come to America, but they grew up where they get to tell women, by the way, good luck telling New York women this, how to dress. They get to tell women they can't drive. They tell women that they can't be seen in public without a male relative. They decide, a male will decide if a woman goes to work or school. If, in the case of a rape, under Sharia, in many countries, a woman needs 4 male eyewitnesses. Now, I talk about a cultural divide that most people don't want to discuss. Is there a cultural divide, people who grow up under Sharia and want, how do we know if they want to come here because they want to find freedom and leave that behind, or if they want to bring it with them? Great Britain has 88 Sharia courts right now.
Well, look, as you know, there is a difference between Islam and Islamism. Islamism is a theocratic and political philosophy that commands its adherents to wage jihad, to either murder or forcibly convert the infidels, by which they mean all of the rest of us, and force us to live under Sharia law.
Isn't that Saudi Arabia? Isn't that Iran? Except different. One is Sunni, one is Shia.
It is certainly the government of Iran. And the Ayatollah Khamenei is Islamist and seeks to impose that vision on the rest of the world. The government of Saudi Arabia has been too willing to fund Islamist strains that the House of Saud itself isn't directly doing it, but many of the Islamist strains, including obviously Osama bin Laden, originated with the Saudis, and there was too much Saudi money behind it.
Grew up in that culture where that is the law of the land. I just don't know, it's so incompatible with our constitutional values.
Well, we've got to have a president that, first of all, just speaks the truth, says enough with political correctness, let's speak the truth.
Last question, exit question. Do you know what's in the 28 redacted pages of the 9/11 report?
I have reviewed those pages, and I believe they should be made public.
Can you give us some insight into what's in them?
I can't without violating laws on classification, so I'm not allowed to do that without violating the law.
Wait, no. I promised the senator that if he reveals it, I will bring him a cake with a file. No, I'm kidding. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll have more. We're in Binghamton, New York with 2016 Republican presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz as Hannity on the road. Continue straight ahead. No process questions. They annoy the candidates when I ask them, but I have to ask them. You said to me on my radio show earlier this week that you think this is going to be a contested convention. Okay, that means somebody has to get to 1237. We know, we've been following Colorado and the battle for delegates and all the comments that other candidates have made. I don't want to talk about that. What I want to ask you is this. as I have watched the process, just as an outsider voter, I can't even vote in a Republican primary. I'm a registered conservative in New York. But I think if it's a national party, is there a need for reform in this way? What I'd like to see, of course I believe in states having the right to choose. Should it the choice, though, be between caucus and primary? Should it be between proportional and winner-take-all? And should the delegates, if we go next time around, should they all be bound versus unbound? Because it gets confusing to everybody. You all confused about this, right?
So I'll make a radical proposition.
Okay.
I believe in the Constitution.
I don't think that's radical.
The Constitution gives this authority to the states. That's the way it's been the entire history of the country. Right. And I got to say, it ain't rocket science. If anyone is running an effective and competent presidential campaign, they ought to be able to figure out how to actually go and win an election.
Understood. The only thing I would like to see going, look, I agree with you. Everybody knew the rules going in, and I agree with your analysis on that completely. Right. I just would like to see, like in New York, every state have all the people participate rather than the convention.
But listen, I don't think every state has to be like New York or every state has to be like California.
Neither do I. I agree.
And the reason why we are seeing so much whining about the rules is what's happened in the last 3 weeks. In the last 3 weeks, there have been a total of 11 elections in 4 states. And in those 11 elections, we have won all 11. Every single one for 3 weeks. So let me take a minute to review. It started with Utah, where we won a landslide. 69% of the vote won every single delegate out of Utah. It went to North Dakota. We won 18 delegates in Utah. Trump won 1 delegate. Then it went to Wisconsin. All of the media said in Wisconsin that it was a state Cruz couldn't win. They said it was a perfect state for Donald, that it's an upper Midwest state, it's an industrial state, not a very large evangelical population. It was heavily blue-collar, union member, working class, actually very similar demographics to much of upstate New York. The day before the election, Donald in Wisconsin promised a, quote, big victory in Wisconsin. The next day, we saw a landslide victory. We won with 48% of the vote, beat Donald by 13 points.
Let me ask this question. So, at a contested convention, it was a really pretty, I think, good analysis in, believe it or not, the Washington Compost. And so my question to you is, how do you see this going down that you get to 1237, considering you believe it's going to be contested? So how do you get to that number? And here's the second part of the question. Take the personalities out of it. Candidate A, candidate B, candidate C. Candidate A wins more states, has more votes, and a lot more delegates. No, this is an important question. And then if that candidate doesn't win in a contested convention, do you worry that those supporters are going to feel disenfranchised?
Look, that is certainly Donald's talking point.
No, I'm not.
But it is inconsistent.
No, wait. Senator, that is not Donald's talking point. I am reading the analysis of every major newspaper. If that happens, what I'm trying to get to, I'm a never Hillary guy. I want to defeat Hillary Clinton, and I don't want to see any supporters disenfranchised. So what I'm asking is, how do you bring those people into the fold, or how does the team come together and not feel disenfranchised?
Look, going back to 1860, there has been one way and only one way to win the Republican nomination, and that is you earn the votes of a majority of the delegates elected by the people. Right. That has been every single election since 1860.
Lincoln got it on the third time.
And by the way, he didn't go in, using the Donald talking point, he didn't go in with the most votes and the most delegates. Instead, what happened was he earned it at the convention, and if you can't get a majority of the delegates to support you, you ain't going to be the nominee, and you ain't going to be the president.
So here's my next question. This is important. So you say it's going to be contested. if in fact
it likely will be
all right, you say it likely will be. Okay. So if we get there, and let's say what happened with Lincoln, let's say you're in second place and you do win this. What I'm concerned about as I read social media, it's the Cruz people hate the Trump people hate the Cruz people. But at the end of the day, I listen to Hillary Clinton's vision for this country, and it scares me. That is a third Obama term. And I worry about unity at the end of the... You all agree with me? Yeah. I worry about unity. That's what I'm asking.
Listen, I emphatically agree, and let me be clear. I love the Trump supporters. I understand why they're supporting Donald Trump. They're angry with Washington. The issues that have animated the Trump supporters, stopping illegal immigration, securing the border, and bringing jobs back from China, back from Mexico, fighting for the working class. Those have been the issues at the heart of my campaign. Those have been the issues that I have been fighting for. And you are absolutely right. We have got to unify the party to win. It's one of the reasons I'm so encouraged by what we're seeing. In the last 3 weeks, we've won 11 elections in a row because Republicans are uniting behind our campaign. And let me point out, of the 17 Republican candidates who started this race, 5 have now endorsed our campaign. We've been endorsed by Rick Perry, by Lindsey Graham, by Jeb Bush, by Scott Walker, and by Carly Fiorina. Now, that is an incredible diversity.
It's a good start, right? And here's my last and final question. John Kasich and Marco Rubio both have a lot of delegates. Marco indicated in an interview with our friend Mark Levin that he is likely to come over and support you. So my question is, even at the end of this process, do you think you will get along with everybody? I remember early in the process, during one of the early debates, everybody said, everybody on this stage is better than what the Democrats are offering. Is it going to end up that way? That's my question.
Look, from my end, I certainly intend for it to be. I have endeavored throughout this campaign. There have been moments that have been nasty and personal and ugly, and I have not responded in kind, and I'm not going to respond in kind. I'm going to keep the focus on issues, on substance, on policy. You know what I think the people of New York care about is not candidates bickering like children. I think what the people of New York care about is how do we bring jobs back to New York? How do we raise wages? How do we keep Americans safe? And that's my focus.
All right, we got to take a break. We're in beautiful Binghamton, New York. When we come back, you all ready to ask some questions? Yeah. We're going to let this great audience ask questions for Senator Ted Cruz as we continue for the hour, the best election coverage right here on Fox. All right, welcome back to Hannity. Hello, Binghamton. We're in Binghamton, New York at the Broome County Forum Theater. We're with Senator Ted Cruz for the entire hour. Our first question from the audience. Hi, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Joella Anderson. And this question was submitted to me by Mrs. Smith's 5th grade class at Shenango Bridge Elementary School. What are your thoughts on Common Core? And what do you believe our education system needs to ensure quality education for all children?
Great question.
It's a terrific question. Let me say thank you to Mrs. Smith's 5th grade class. And on Common Core, if I'm elected president, in the very first days in office, I will direct the U.S. Department of Education that Common Core ends that day.
Sir, you want to add something? Go ahead.
And let me say a little more on this. It has been the abuse of executive power from the Obama administration that has forced Common Core on the states. But the silver lining is everything done with executive power can be undone. And what I'd like to see long term is that we abolish the Federal Department of Education.
Can I ask that? And that would mean giving the states the right to choose.
That's exactly right. And, you know, some folks in the media say, gosh, that means you don't value education. It's exactly the opposite. Education is too valuable. We should block grant that money, send it back to the states. But, you know, the parents and teachers of New York know much better what your kids need than do some bureaucrats in Washington.
Sir, next question. Hi. What's your name?
My name is Alan Michaels. Hello, Senator.
How are you doing?
I love the Constitution. Cruz loves the Constitution. So by some transitive law, I think that means I love you.
Well, thank you.
Welcome to New York. Go ahead.
I think to lower Sean's blood pressure, I think the Constitution is what will bring us all together. Can you just expand on the Constitution, either generally or maybe about the budget process?
You are known as a constitutionalist. You are known as a constitutional conservative.
Well, and it has been, I mean, I've spent my entire life fighting to defend the Constitution and Bill of Rights. And I think, sir, your question is very insightful. We've got a lot of issues that tear us apart, that divide us. And I actually think the Constitution and Bill of Rights gives an avenue to unify us. Let's take, for example, the question of legalizing marijuana. That's a question that's being debated in a lot of different states. Now, my personal views, I'm not a supporter of legalization. If Texas were voting on it, I'd vote against it because I'm concerned about the abuse of drugs among kids. But I'm a constitutionalist. I think that is a decision for the states to make. And so if some states choose to do that, they have the authority to do that. We should respect it. You know, Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis referred to our federalism system of 50 states as laboratories of democracy. And we would expect the people of New York to come to a different decision than Texas or Florida or California, and that's great.
We got a break. Real quick, how many times have you argued before the Supreme Court?
9 times.
Okay, we'll take a break. We're in Binghamton, New York with Senator Ted Cruz for the hour. More audience questions as we continue. Welcome back to Hannity. We're in Binghamton, New York. And members of our audience are now asking Senator Ted Cruz questions. Sir, how are you? What's your name?
Jordan Raitzis.
Hi.
Hi. So my question is, as a young libertarian, why should I and people like me support you?
Look, it is a great question, and there's no doubt if we're going to win, we got to bring together a broad coalition that unites us all. As a libertarian, I would say there has been no one that is in this race right now who has fought harder for principles of liberty. And if you look at the Constitution and Bill of Rights, whether it is the First Amendment and free speech, whether it is the First Amendment and religious liberty, whether it's the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms, or whether it is our privacy, the right to keep the federal government out of our business, or whether it is the 10th Amendment, bringing power from the federal government back to the states and local governments. I've spent my whole life fighting for the Bill of Rights and
Senator,
Constitution, and I give you my word as president, I'm going to do the exact same thing.
I want to ask you one question that we've really got to... I have known Prime Minister Netanyahu for many, many years. When I wrote my first book in 2002, I was honored to have him blurb my book. I've known him. I was in Israel in August in August a year ago when the conflict was going on. I went down in the tunnels. I feel our relationship has been so poorly damaged.
Yes.
It frightens me. As United States and Israel, we must be close to because we have a common enemy. I want to get your thoughts.
Sean, you are right, and during my time in the Senate, I have been one of the leading defenders of Israel in the United States Senate. And I will say, there are a lot of people in New York and across the country who are rightly worried about strengthening our relationship with Israel. And this is an area on which there are real policy differences between me and Donald Trump. Donald has said that he would be neutral between Israel and the Palestinians. I strongly disagree with him as that. I believe we should stand unapologetically with the nation of Israel. Donald has also suggested that we should reduce the military aid that we give to Israel, and he said we should make them pay big time for that military aid. I think, if anything, we should expand the military aid. And let me give you one final example, which is, as president, on day one, I'll begin the process of moving the American embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Donald's campaign is being run by an individual who was paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by Saudi Arabia to lobby against moving the embassy to Jerusalem. So those are policy differences on which we disagree that I think are relevant to the voters.
We'll take a break. We're in Binghamton, New York. It's Hannity. We're on the road. We'll continue right after this. All right, welcome back to Hannity. That is all the time we have left this evening. Senator, you want to say one thing before we go?
Well, I would say Tuesday is the election here in New York. I would ask you to come together, stand together. If you want to beat Hillary, there's only one candidate who can win the nomination and beat Hillary, and we're coming together and uniting.
Binghamton, New York, we love you. Thanks for being with us, and thank you. Have a great night.